on unconditional and rigorous following of all, without exceptions, clauses of the Minsk agreement.
While the world was eating up all this peace talk, the collective West was militarizing and pumping billions into Ukraine. Russian President Vladimir Putin has stated on multiple occasions that Ukraine was preparing to solve the conflict in Donbass by brutal force. He even provided intelligence and exact dates of the anticipated massive offensive. Now, that prompted Russia's special military operation designed to secure the lives of peaceful civilians and demilitarize Ukraine, whose new leaders had gained a sense of invincibility thanks to the multi-billion flow of NATO weapons and training.
This war was not started by us. It was started in 2014 after the coup in Ukraine. It was launched by the Ukrainian authorities to suppress the will of the people in Donbass. The guarantors, France and Germany, forgot that they are guarantors. They needed to return the situation to a legal process, to hold elections in Donbass. This was not done. Whenever I remind my colleagues about this on the phone, they say nothing about it, as they have nothing to say.
Just a month before the start of Russia's special military operation, Washington sent over 200,000 pounds of lethal aid and instructors to Ukraine, while demanding Moscow withdraw troops from Russian territory, its own territory, along the border with Ukraine. Now, the Kremlin then demanded legally binding guarantees which would rule out NATO's eventual eastward expansion and hence the deployment of offensive weapons systems in countries neighboring Russia. Why? Well, because Russia did not want neighboring countries to serve as points of attack against its own territory, but that was dismissed out of hand.
Together, the United States and our NATO allies made clear we will not slam the door shut on NATO's open door policy.
But for Russia, this was a red line that key security interests and the country's sovereign right to defend were ignored. Just like 25 years ago when the West promised not to expand NATO even an inch to the east.
We understand that not only the Soviet Union, but for other European countries as well, it is important to have guarantees that if the United States keeps its presence in Germany within the framework of NATO, not an inch of NATO's present military jurisdiction will spread in an eastern direction.
We will think it over. We intend to discuss all these issues in detail at the leadership level. It goes without saying that the expansion of NATO's sphere is unacceptable.
We agree with that.
They have agreed, they said, but take a look at the map and ask yourself if those promises are now worth a nickel. NATO has more than doubled in size. Now back to the events of 2014 and the so-called Maidan protests in Kiev that resulted in a power grab that was fueled by nationalist extremists. The Autonomous Republic of Crimea was the first to sever ties with Ukraine, with locals voting overwhelmingly in favor of independence and becoming a part of Russia once again. Now, that was a decision that many had waited for decades after the entire peninsula was transferred to Ukraine by the Soviet government in 1954. While the people of Crimea experienced a relatively smooth transition, the streets of other cities such as Odessa turned bloody as anti-Maidan protests were violently suppressed. On May 2nd, 2014, 48 people burned to death when they were trapped inside Odessa's House of Trade Unions, which was set ablaze by pro-Kiev radicals. Around 250 more were injured in clashes in the same area.
There were not just clashes in the city, but arson and mass murder. The administrative building was set on fire. People were walking around this building, shooting at it with rifles. They threw Molotov cocktails and other explosive devices. Law enforcement was standing there and just watching. They did not do anything. The question arises why? Because they didn't have orders to, or because they received an order that they should not interfere.
Almost 9 years later, and still no one has been held accountable for those atrocities. Any scheduled court hearings were derailed by the so-called patriots. The Odessa tragedy became a point of no return that opened the door to an all-out civil war. Take a look at the situation from Russia's point of view if you can, and ask yourself these simple questions. Could Moscow leave the people of Donbass behind, a population that has been suffering for nearly 9 years and continues to die under constant and indiscriminate artillery shelling by Ukraine to this day? Was the Kremlin wrong not to trust the West and NATO, who pumped billions of military aid into Kiev over all these years? Is Russia wrong when it says NATO expansion is a direct security threat, especially taking into account that Washington has never hidden its true reasons?
The United States aids Ukraine and her people so that we can fight Russia over there and we don't have to fight Russia here.
So, who really provoked the war and incited hatred among the people of Ukraine? The answer is clear to the families of thousands of people here in Donbass killed by Kiev's illegally installed regime. The point of no return was crossed a long time ago. Roman Kosarev, RT, Donetsk Republic.